in 35 U.S.C. 120 says that that specific reference can be made either on the face of the patent itself, i.e. in the first sentence of the specification, or it can be made in the patent application.
And counsel, what do you say to your brother's argument that it's the earlier version, the 1996 version of the reg that governs there?
Well, I think there's two issues at play, Your Honor, and let me try and clarify the issue a little bit. With respect to the statute I was just talking about, 35 U.S.C. Section 120, the parties actually don't debate the applicability of that statute. At all times, the statute allowed priority to be claimed either in the patent itself or in the patent's application. What the parties dispute is 37 CFR 1.78, which is the PTO's implementing rule for this specific reference requirement in Section 120. And the dispute there involves whether this pre-November 2000 version applied or the November 2000 version applied. We don't dispute that the pre-November version would have required the reference to be included in the first sentence of the specification or on the face of the patent. We believe, let me back up one second. Our understanding of the reason that 1.78 was amended in November 2000 was to comport with the statute better. The statute allows a reference to be made in either the application or in the patent itself. The earlier version of 1.78 was misaligned with the statute because it required the reference to be made in that issued patent and did not allow a patentee to make the reference in its application. The PTO fixed that with the new version of 1.78 and allowed that reference to be made either in the patent or in the application.
But counsel, doesn't it say something about its effective date?
So in the Federal Register, in the actual document in the Federal Register, it discusses, which is prepared by the PTO, it discusses an effective date for applications filed after that November 2000. Well, we agree with their quotation of that provision. However, the Patent Office itself, the same group that issued that, has consistently interpreted in its Manual of Patent Examination Procedure, the MPEP, has consistently interpreted so that the November 2000 version, when the Patent Office conducts their own examinations and the way they instruct others to, is that the November 2000 version applies to all prior filed patents. It applies retroactively. The Patent Office hasn't explained expressly why that is, but I imagine it's because that's the way the statute actually operates. And what the Patent Office is trying to do, I would submit, is keep its practices in line with the statute.
And counsel, what do you say, and I'm sure this is what you're planning to address in a moment, but what do you say to the further argument that even if I were to adopt your argument in that regard, that it could be in the application data sheet, that what do you say to your brother's argument that it's not in what can be properly termed the application data sheet?
Your Honor, there's very little law on this issue. The only case that even touches this issue at all is the DuPont case that's been discussed a little bit. No other case has really addressed the requirements of Section 1.76 is the section that deals with application data sheets. So we're somewhat in uncharted water on this issue. But what we would claim is that throughout the applications and prosecution history of both the 690 and 045, Worlds consistently claimed priority to the November 95 application. Now, we recognize the prosecution wasn't perfect. Worlds was a small company. They were just trying to get going with their patents. This was not your perfect patent prosecution that you'd hope for, but frankly, what is? And anyone at all looking through those applications would realize that November 95 was the claimed priority date. With respect to their specific argument about whether this was an application data sheet, we admit that there's nothing that's quote-unquote actually labeled an application data sheet that was submitted.
178.
Appears to be reference to a priority date